your podcast app. You'll see there's a discourse happening. Is this book a masterpiece or problematic? One's a lifelong diehard fan, the other's a first-time reader. Both are really smart and funny and attractive. Sweet feather, sweet feather, titans and hierarchy. Sweet feather, sweet feather, relentless focus on their bodies. Sweet feather, sweet feather, what do they mean by all American? Sweet feather, sweet feather, no sex, just titillation.
Dr. Pardo.
How are
good.
you?
I'm good.
How's your day?
It's like long and stressful, and I'm just like but I texted you earlier to say, like, I can't wait to talk about this, not because of the book, just because I need a Pardo pick me up. You know those days where you just need a Pardo to pick you right up?
I do know those days.
You're lucky you're a Pardo, right? You've always got a Pardo around to pick you up.
And how can I support you in this moment?
I think you're doing it. I think just kind of like being your kind of usual, effervescent, lovely self.
Normalcy, a sense of normalcy.
That's all. I just want stability. I just want to feel like I'm in the safe, loving hands of someone who really understands speech acts, anthropology, cultural analysis, and clams.
And you did misidentify Stanton Wortham's title of article as being about speech acts rather than speech events, and the kind of text in the works cited, Tina, come, and you did misspell Stanton Wortham's name. But you know what? I didn't mind it. I didn't mind it. You know why? Because they can look at the picture if they want the right information. And that's
Exactly. I'm not, what am I, like a curator of correct information? No.
a notary public?
Yeah.
No. Simple human.
Just a simple human, like the trash can.
If this brings you comfort,
Yeah.
I want to also tell you that I encourage us in today's call to absolutely embrace spontaneity, embrace the possibility that, super additions are, if Sweet Valley is liminal, the super additions are the kind of Sweet Valley of Sweet Valley. They're the liminal of the liminal. And so we can give ourselves room to take it wherever we want. We don't have to take it too serious. We don't have to put pressure on doing all of our this and our that. And we can just have some fun. We can have a nice time today, Robert. How does that sound?
Let's just have a perfect summer. Can we just say to listeners, just so you know, so they call it a super edition.
Tell me what you think it is.
I mean, I don't know what it is, but what I will tell you I experienced is it's like maybe 6 or 8 books smushed together into one. So it's like any plot of a book is in here. There's just so much happening.
And at one point I made a list, Robert. I gave up and I said, at some point we just have to start listing items because it's so wild. And should I just read you some of the random selections from my list of things that happen in this book?
Please do.
A fire.
Of course.
Someone is lost in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
A man named Robbie October.
Oh, of course.
We have Disneyland. A bear attack.
Good.
A villainous seductress at a Hollywood mansion.
Say paella. Say paella. Oh my God, did you just say paella when I said paella?
Yeah, that's really funny. We have paella in Santa Barbara. We have hot and sour soup in San Francisco. We have a secret identity and tragic backstory reveal. We have a vacation with Collins, Dalton, and no parents. And, this was kind of very much minimized. And this was, for me, the most shocking moment of the text. And I wrote it in the middle of my notebook here. Human trafficking. We have a case of human trafficking. George Fowler is revealed to be sexually blackmailing Ms. Dalton into his basically sexual prisoner.
Like, what? Listeners, either strap yourself in or skip, because this is going to be a wild one. And I encourage you, don't skip.
I mean, it's wild. This is a wild book. I thought there was a lot of fun moments. There was, in terms of plot, there was a lot of scrawling moments of what in the actual, this is crazy. So we'll get into that. But, we don't have to be, I'm okay with this one sort of being what it is. I'd love to give a bit of context of the super editions and what they are as a form. And by the way, I don't have all the answers. I have where I'm coming from, you have where you're coming from. And someone
And
on
we'll
the
meet in the
internet
middle.
what it is. But so we're doing the podcast episodes in order of publication. And so there's the like normal series of the books, which is the like 180, whatever the hell it is. And those are like the normals. They go in numbers. Then there's like a bunch of sort of special ones. Basically, there's like the super editions, which are the vacation books. So these are the ones that happen on Christmas, on summer. And these start coming to us in the 20s. So it's like we got to book 20 something. And then in order of publication, the next one is the first super edition, which is Perfect Summer. And then what happens is like we get the super editions, the rest of the super editions like interspersed, then we get like super thrillers. I love the super thrillers. It raises a lot of questions about chronology and timelines that, I mean, we're going to have to suspend some disbelief here.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we survived a bear attack. We can deal with the fact that we're jumping. Is it 6 months forward in time? Like we were just at like a fall dance, right?
Here's the thing, Robert. Here's the thing.
Uh-oh.
I haven't revisited the super editions since childhood. Okay. So I'm coming to this, with my memories being jogged. So like when I started reading that it was like summertime, I'm like, oh, okay. So is this going to be about them being tour guides at Cycle Lake? Because in the books we've been reading, they've been planning for that this summer, right? Did you have the same thought?
I mean, my literal, my first note is, why aren't they tour guiding?
Yeah. My understanding or my sense is the following. These exist in other times. So like there's going to be a Christmas one. That's not going to be the same Christmas that we're going to encounter in the main books. So these are like multiple other summers, but it's not like it's next summer and then the one after, because they never get that old in this series. We just sort of have to think of these as parallel summers, just parallel summers that exist in the universe.
Francine Pascal invented the multiverse. Francine Pascal invented the multiverse. So everyone's like, oh, Doctor Strange and the blah, 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 and like everything everywhere all at once. And it's like, cool. Like, that's Francine. Sliding doors. That's Francine.
Multiverse is the word I was looking for. Thank you.
It's a word Francine created.
Well, certainly a concept. Let me tell you, if you think it's hard to swallow, this is practice for the thrillers. Because once we get to the thrillers, one summer internship they have at a newspaper, 4 murderers stalk them. In one summer, 4 distinct separate psychos stalk them and almost murder them in one summer internship, unrelated. So
I buy it.
They exist in the multiverse insofar as they're sort of twin and triplet summers, but they are tied to the chronology of and become coherent within the chronology of the main books in the sense of relationship plot lines that then I believe are pretty much going to be consistent with then what happens in the regular editions as we move forward. For example, like Annie and Ricky in Love Letters started having little conflicts spurred by Caroline, and then they resolved it. In Perfect Summer, we learned they recently broke up. I'm like, okay, so maybe that's, and then I assume when we get back to the next one, they're going to be still broken up. So, I mean, we'll make sure that tracks, but that's my assumption of what we're going to see.
Like Dalton and Collins, they were just dating, they just broke up. And in this book, they just broke up. So it's just like picking up some of those pieces.
Exactly.
It's really interesting. And
so it is grounded in the real world of it in that way. So it's sort of, again, it's an in-between of an in-between. In some ways it's grounded and in some ways it's fantastical. And let me just tell you, it was giving Yogi Bear when the bear scene at the end, it was an absolute cartoon. It was Hanna-Barbera and it was just out of control and you had to laugh. There were so many pages that I just wrote LOL in huge letters because there's some fun. We have some fun in this one.
Is it more cartoonish dealing with that bear attack or the way that they put out a fire, like an out of control forest fire, just the 12 of them just like kind of fanning and stomping it out. And it's like, oh, we got it out. We're good. Bye.
It must be said that their security and safety protocols need an absolute overhaul.
If they have them.
Jessica fully goes missing in the woods overnight. They never go to the park rangers. They never go to try to make any contact to get any like first responders or like search people. And our villain, Courtney, appropriately brings up the point that there are professionals for this and we should get them.
Yeah.
She doesn't want to help. And they just decide to go search themselves. And all the kids are probably then going to get lost and eaten too. And it's absolutely demented and deranged. And we know that they know how to access the park rangers because when the fire happens, they send Olivia and Roger to go bike to them. So we know they're in biking distance. So why the fuck they didn't go when Jessica missing? Mamma mia.
So can we just start with the fact that it's summer 12 to 13 high school students are on a bike trip chaperoned by hunky Collins and seductive and mysterious Dalton. And they're just biking up the California coast for 2 weeks. So that's kind of the frame.
Yeah, and the sort of contextual factors that kind of bring some excitement to this include the fact that everyone knows Dalton and Collins have recently broken up, although no one's really sure why, and we're kind of wondering what the vibes is going to be between them. Also, there's Lila and Ms. Dalton have also tension because since Dalton broke up with Collins, she went back to George Fowler, Lila's dad, so Lila's resenting her. There's also a sort of mystery person joining the trip who's called Barry Cooper, who is the nephew of Chrome Dome, the principal, and everyone's wondering basically, is he going to be fat or not? And it turns out he is fat, and he is not only just consistently mocked and degraded and like fat phobia by the kids and the people, but also by the narrator of the book loves to reinforce that as well.
So we basically we're biking up the coast of California and stopping in all of these different places. And sometimes when we stop, we just enjoy nature. And sometimes when we stop, we're at a hostel. And sometimes when we stop, we see an incredibly sexy, muscled Robbie October. And sometimes when we stop at a movie executive's Beverly Hills mansion and pick up his daughter, and she comes along on the bike ride with us. So it's lots of different kind of vignettes that continue in a absolute breakneck, madcap, unbelievable pace. And there's just too much to go on.
It's just so fun. And yeah, I think part of what makes it so fantastical is all these different locations that we wouldn't typically get to spend time in. Plus it's the whole group, all these different dynamics, all the various sexual tensions and whatevers that get played out through who's going to sleep in a tent with who, or who's going to be able to cook on a grill. Then we get a Hollywood mansion, and then all these different set pieces and physical comedy that happens, or just nonsense around these different places, and them just getting to experience stuff they don't usually get to experience. And the parents aren't there, which is really fun. And we of course are always reminded that Collins considers himself first and foremost a friend to these kids. So it's really there's no adults at all, which is
terrifying.
Which is something.
I mean, the number of times he says he's their friend, the number of times that I'm someone needs to get an adult, they're dealing with real shit. This is still a Sweet Valley High book, so they're still dealing with very mature, real issues, and yet
we get dark. We absolutely get dark, and I'm not even talking about the human trafficking. I'm talking about the backstory, but that sort of went into the human trafficking. But And
I do want to just for our listeners, this is not to correct you, but I would say it's probably more sexual exploitation than human trafficking, because he's not trying to make money off of her. He's just trying to force her into a relationship with him.
Oh, is trafficking means you always have to be getting money?
I believe so.
I thought it's if you have someone. I thought it's if you have someone against your will as your sexual partner, that's trafficking. For example, a Carl, if he would have whatever Elizabeth. Would he have been a trafficker?
No.
Could he have been trafficking?
Not unless he tried to get money out of her.
It would just be kidnapping and sexual assault and false imprisonment or something like this?
Exactly. Now, we are both lawyers, but neither of us, like Ned, is a human trafficking attorney. So
thank you for correcting me. But it's more than exploitation. It's and I don't like to believe women. But
no.
If Nora's account is to be believed, she, for the period of time she was with Fowler, I think if we're pretty much to understand the only way to interpret what he's saying, essentially, is that she didn't really want to be with him, but he had this information on her, and he blackmailed her to stay with him and to be his sexual partner.
What's weird about that?
If we're trying to be lawyers about it, what do you think would be the word to describe it? If it's not trafficking, but I feel it's something more than exploitation. When you blackmail, does that add some component of the fact that then becomes coercive? Does that then become sexual violence, right? So it's so what do we call this? The word I want to say is trafficking, but I guess you think, should we Google? No, I don't need to Google human trafficking right now.
No, you don't need that in your search history.
I also want to say they have something called Phantom Nights.
I love this.
Their itinerary. As Robert said, there's a diversity of sort of accommodation. So sometimes they're camping outside, and sometimes they're at a mansion, and sometimes they're at a hostel, and most of the time it's pretty modest accommodations, I think, except for the mansion. It's like most of the things are all booked, but then there's 2 phantom nights where they're gonna decide all together, like the day of, where they're gonna stay. And like, I first thought it was more insane than it was, because I didn't realize that the teachers would be with them, they'd be all together. I thought it was like they're on their own, and each student is responsible for finding their own accommodations. I thought it was like a independence challenge or something like this, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
And I'm like, that's crazy. This is a recipe for like really bad idea. And then I realized like, oh, they're deciding as a group. And I'm like, this is even worse. It's like the stupidest idea ever, because he's like, so what does everyone feel like doing? So half the group was like, I'm tired. And then half the group was like, but I want to keep going. And it's like, so they just argue for 2 hours, and he asks like 12 different teenagers their opinion until they all can come to an agreement. It's like the stupidest thing ever. And then it's like the last minute, so they can't find anything. So they end up going to a random barn. I go, this is a horror movie. I go, I can tell you 5 different horror movies I've watched in literally the past 8 weeks that have this exact plot, called Group of White Teenagers shows up at barn in remote field, knocks on random doors until someone lets them stay. Anyway, they end up staying in a beautiful greenhouse. But you want to talk about the title?
The title is Perfect Summer,
Mhm.
which is hilarious for a number of different reasons.
Go
one
off.
one of which is just, it's not perfect. It's terrible. It seems like basically only bad things happen over and over and over and over and over again. This is no one's idea of a perfect summer. It's also not even the whole summer.
And what do we call this? We call this irony. And it's true. They're all anticipating it's going to be perfect summer. But then what happens? It ends up being terrible, terrible summer until basically the last 5 minutes. And then the last chapter, 17, so there's 17 chapters in this one, starts with Elizabeth tells Enid that's when the fun really began. And it's at the end of the entire book. And so she's basically saying like, finally everything was okay. And we like, roasted one marshmallow, called it a night. Like, it's a terrible summer.
It's a cruel, cruel summer.
Mhm.
And I mean that both in the Bananarama and the Taylor Swift way.
Now, let me ask you a question. This, to my knowledge, was your first time reading a hard copy. I'd love to know just what the experience was like for you in general, and also were you able to successfully obscure the cover so I could show it to you for the first time live today?
So listeners, normally I read with Kindle Unlimited. I encourage you to look into that as well. For the super editions, I've purchased hard copy books. And I do not enjoy the experience of reading this as a hard copy at all. I have this very weird feeling that these are like treasured artifacts. And so I was very nervous about how I handled the book, what I did to the book.
No, that's only if you're like trying to, no, that's only if you like care and you're trying to the collection or you, whatever. You can do whatever you want with them.
I know. I didn't write in the book, which I wish I had. I didn't bring my best self to this because I was so like, I wouldn't even leave it. So normally I would like leave a book open face down. And I was like, well, I don't want to ruin the spine.
To be fair, it depends on the condition, because some of them aren't, depending on how good condition, when you're buying these books used or from whatever, 45 years ago, some of them are not in great condition. Some of them, I will say, I've been reading them and they do fall apart in my hands. So from that perspective, you do, but if it's in reasonably good condition, I think you should try to feel empowered to own the experience a little more.
Okay. It's in very good condition, this book.
Then you should assert yourself with it.
I think because it's in such good condition, I should be treasuring it so I can give it to my grandchildren. I don't know.
I mean, would your grandchildren not treasure your notes that would serve as this beautiful extra textual kind of...
No, because they would then be so tempted to sell it for money because it's got 1/2 of Sweet Valley Hive's notes in it. I mean, that becomes its own collector item. Like, you know what I mean?
And then it would create a bitter feud within the family that would divide for generations. No, we can't have that.
We can't have that. So I can't write it, is what it comes down to.
And you've seen the cover or what?
I've seen glimpses of the cover. I've tried to avert my eyes.
Okay, I appreciate that.
I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to sugarcoat it to you. I believe there are 2 young blonde women on the cover. I can't tell you what they're doing. They looked to be,
To me, I love this one. I love this cover. I love it.
I can actually look at my own.
I forgot.
So this is interesting. We have a pinky and a yellowy. Elizabeth, I assume in yellow, although again, I can't see any kind of beauty mark.
Mm-hmm.
Astride a bicyclette. her yellow short shorts riding up to expose quite a bit of thigh. I think this is probably the most exposed skin I've seen on a Sweet Valley High cover. We've got Jessica leaning on the bicyclette, one arm on the bicyclette, one arm behind her head, exposing sweet pit meat. I hate that I said that. I hate that I said that. I'm sorry.
Why?
I'm sorry.
Why would you say that?
I don't know.
That's so upsetting. I can't continue.
No. And here I thought my notes in this book would rip apart everything. It turns out that me just describing the cover.
Let me just tell you, okay, when I looked at this cover, I said glamour and sex. Yes, is she wearing a polo? Yes, is it a little bit on the wheat colored side? Yeah, let's call it yellow. Yeah, it's a polo, but it's a little form-fitting. And guess what else? It's tucked into these short yellow shorts. It's like kind of 50s looking. She's also working her angles in a way I have never seen. She's creating curves. She's creating motion. She's creating the eyes moving around in a circle because of how she has articulated these curves. I mean, if you didn't know better, you'd think she was Jess. And Jess is looking absolutely lighthearted, absolutely having fun. They both have a little wind blowing through the hair. They just look gorgeous. And I wrote glamour, sexy, and angles. And I wrote Liz on a hog of her own. And
Is that a reference to Virginia Woolf, I assume? A hog of one's own?
I believe, Robert, that this is the first cover that has a background image beyond just a sort of vague splash of color. We have a landscape. You know, we have a blue sky, clouds, and some grass and trees. Great. A field. And with this one, we have only one tagline.
Geared up for adventure. I loved it. Sorry. That's good. That's good pun work. They're on a bike, bicycle gears, geared up for adventure. Love it. I don't know how we're going to have a podcast about this because it is so many distinct plots that just like...
It's 100 books. Any one of those would have been its own book in the regular
Easily.
edition. We could do sort of plot summaries for each of the plots, like a sort of overview version. And then I think we should just talk about whatever we want and not do a detailed going through.
Love for us. Love this for us. We could alternate and each of us could pick like a storyline and tell the story just so that we get all of the plot out. And then we could just do a silly, fun romp.
Great. You want to start? How about Courtney?
Yeah, Courtney's a big one. I thought about picking Courtney. So one of our early stops is in Beverly Hills at a movie executive's mansion, and he hosts the trip for a couple of days. He is somebody's friend, but I can't remember whose friend. Is he Mr. Patman's friend?
Fowler? Yeah.
Maybe it's Mr. Fowler's friend?
One of them, yeah.
Basically, there is this incredibly gorgeous high school girl, jet black hair, perfect body, the usual. And she is really mean and really dismissive to the bike group. She calls them goody goodies. She talks about how stupid they are and how they don't know fun and they suck. And she wants to run off with her sexy, troubled boyfriend, Nolan. And Nolan has done some bad things. He's into drugs and petty thievery. And last year he held up a grocery store. So, and those three things are kind of listed as if they're basically the same. Drugs, petty thievery, and holding up a grocery store. And so her father sends her off with the bike trip to get her away from her bad boyfriend. And she concocts this convoluted plan where she is going to pretend to be super nice and super sweet so everyone loves her. She's going to tell Todd a sob story about her dad being alcoholic. And Todd is going to fall for her. She's then going to tell her dad that she's got this new goody-goody boyfriend. And her dad will let her come back. And she's going to bring Todd back with her for the rest of the summer and use Todd as a beard so that she can actually go out with Nolan.
Her supposed thinking is that because her dad was also so specifically charmed with Todd, who apparently, by the way, we learned is a quote unquote film buff. And so has, maybe takes a special interest in matters of Hollywood, and her dad's a producer or something like that.
Of course, he's obsessed with old Hollywood. He's gay.
Of course.
He loves Mommy Dearest. Oh, he loves All About Eve.
I know when he took Liz to see Teenage Terror, he really was wanting to go see All About Eve. Oh. And by the way, it's funny that you say All About Eve because, and I've already said too much stuff. Okay, I'm stopping. There's an All About Eve book, basically.
Yeah, I mean, there are elements of All About Eve in this book.
Sure. So Courtney's thinking then is like, okay, if I can get Todd to like agree to come home with me, my dad will be like, okay, I guess you can come home because like, you're right, Todd is kind of good. So, okay, yeah, you can come home, and then she'll just go off with Nolan, which is the stupidest thing you've ever heard. And then that is what happens basically, except Todd at the last minute doesn't leave with her, but like everything about it is crazy. Todd is dumber in this book than I think we've ever seen him. This girl, Courtney, senses how dumb he is immediately and decides to prey on him. And it's pretty funny because like she basically in 3 seconds, like convinces him to hate Liz. Like Liz gets mad at him briefly. And he's like, wow, Courtney, you have all the qualities Liz used to have. And now she's a bitch. So yeah, I'll come back to Hollywood with you. And she's like, yeah. And you can probably get a job like working on some films. And he's like, you really think so? Okay, that sounds great. He's so dumb.
So dumb. Okay, your turn, please. Do you want to do Dalton and I'll do Robbie October?
Okay. What's going on with Dalton? Lila is resentful towards her because she's dating her father again. And famously, Lila is always craving more attention from her father, and he never has time for her. And now Dalton even takes even more of that, so we can understand the pain that this comes from. That being said, she does some very, very cruel things in this book. So she's coming into this with an axe to grind. And so through bumping into some people that they bump into in one of these towns, one of them's like, oh, that's your teacher? Like, yeah, we know her, Beth Curtis, of course. And Lila's like, hmm? And she finds out that Dalton changed her identity and has some secret backstory. And then we eventually find out what it is. And I'm going to actually go to my notes for this because there's some very specific points that we're going to really need to clarify here. We're going to need to be specific. So my first thought was witness protection. I always go to witness protection, right? Whenever there's a secret identity, witness protection. You know, of course, Lila, when she finds out it's a secret identity, is assuming that it's something like she has done something bad versus that she's necessarily a victim. Lila sort of finds out this may be partial information. Dalton, née Beth Curtis, was formerly married to a rich guy. That rich guy, she left. Subsequently, he died by suicide. Subsequently, after that, the family apparently blamed her for it, and that was apparently well known. And then she disappeared, didn't show up at the funeral, no one ever heard from her again. That is the level of information Lila receives, okay? And so she then processes that around, she obviously goes after guys with money, so she's going to try to be doing the same thing to my dad. And then she like blackmails Dalton. Like when it's her turn to carry the pots and pans on her back, she like makes Dalton do it. And everyone's like, well, Lila, it's actually your turn. And she and Dalton share a look, and Dalton's like, no, Roger, it's okay. And Dalton is so annoying in this book. And at the end, there's a point where she tells Roger, she's like, I'm just bad news. You should just stay away from me. I'm just nothing but trouble. I'm like, Dalton, get a grip. You're so annoying. So anyways, that's what Lila knows. So she blackmails her with that. And then Dalton tells the rest of the story to Roger, and the details that she shares to Roger after seeing she's nothing but trouble is basically that, okay, first of all, there was abuse happening. Why are you laughing?
Because the way that you went, first of all, okay. Because it's like there are 30 things going on.
The first component is we learn, according to Dalton, and I do not like to believe women, that there was an abuse and alcoholism component with her late husband. So he was alcoholic. He was in some ways, maybe he was emotionally abusive or something. And at least once he was physically abusive, I think. And then she left him. And then he died by suicide. The family was apparently harassing her. So they felt, because they felt she had a role in this or something. And I don't know how this all happened, by the way, before the funeral. I guess happened pretty quick. But so somehow enough before the funeral to make her not show up to the funeral. The family is harassing her and quote unquote threatening to destroy her career. One of my many, many questions about this is, I don't get what they have on her. Like they're acting as if this dynamic that they can go after her. Like, I get that, like, when stalkers have a lot of money and power, they can exert a lot of control over victims. And like, I understand that just by virtue of these being an extremely powerful family, like, I'm sure they could do things to impact her career and all of this, but like, she talks about it as if it's like they have information on her, to where like, if it was revealed what happened, like, she'd be done. But it's like, why? Just because her husband, who was abusive, died by suicide after she left him? Like, it's not like there's any, she was never like investigated or considered in any way responsible for this. Like, what are they going to do against her?
I think what we are to take from that is that the family would imply that Dalton was implicated in the death, that like maybe she killed him or something. But it doesn't make sense, because did she get money from it? Like,
we never get any information to that end. Yeah, that could be a thing that happened, but there's nothing to support that.
No.
And so it just feels kind of like, I don't know that she had to do all that. She had to change her name, run away, change her identity, and go to Sweet Valley and become Ms. Dalton. And she chose the name Dalton.
Nora.
I mean, okay, so she moves to Sweet Valley. She changes her identity to Nora fucking Dalton. I guess she has a nice relationship with Collins, and then
what I believe happened is George and Miss Dalton had like a normal relationship.
okay.
And then George does work with Beth Curtis's late husband's family and heard the story and put two and two together.
Mhm.
And Dalton and Fowler broke up. She dates Collins, and then Fowler comes back to her and blackmails her into dumping Collins and instead dating Fowler again.
And I'm going to go to the text right now, because if you told me this, I kind of wouldn't believe it. I would say, surely you're exaggerating. Surely this isn't what I think it may be human trafficking, what you think is at minimum sexual exploitation. If I were to hear that, if you were to tell me, oh, one of the Sweet Valley High storylines is that George Fowler, Lila's father, one of the like quote unquote people in this town, like within our community, and like, not that he's like necessarily good, he's a terrible father and whatever, but like, I do not think he was doing human trafficking. And
It turns out
so casually. I wouldn't believe it if I didn't see it. So let me just tell you so that you can believe it, listeners. She's telling Collins, and he's like, why didn't you tell anyone? And she's like, John's family, her late husband, they said if I spilled a word of it, they'd make me wish I'd be the one who died. I had no choice but to leave town. And then he's like, well, why didn't you tell anyone when you got here? And she's like, well, if they would have discovered my talking about their son in Sweet Valley, they would ruin my new life. It's just like, okay. So then he goes, okay, what about George? She goes, he knows the Curtises, does a business with them. He heard the story and figured out who I was. Of course, he heard their version of the story.
Whatever that might be.
But I was too frightened to tell him the truth, which again, like, not clear how there's any stakes or difference between those things or how that even matters. And I was terrified he'd expose my former life, being the victim of domestic violence, to the entire town of Sweet Valley. Blackmail. Roger Collins' jaw dropped open in shock. Not exactly. Nora Dalton lowered her eyes. He just sort of managed to take up more and more of my time. Dot, dot, dot. Oh, what does it matter anyway? Now I'll have to flee again and hide. I'm like, if there's a word that isn't trafficking, or a switch is whatever to describe, like, I do not know how the hell. Like, that is terrifying. That is dark. That is the darkest thing I think we've had in the series yet, I believe.
I mean, there's real competition, let's say.
What, the pungent odor? The unrecognizable pungent odor?
I mean, the whole Carl thing. I mean, the like all night long. I mean, there's been lots of things. Yeah, it's hard to rank.
Trafficking.
Or something.
And the more we talk about it, the more, and again, I refuse to Google, but I become more convinced it is trafficking.
Do you want me to do quickly Robbie October?
Yeah.
There's almost nothing with Robbie October. Jessica sees Robbie October at a hostel where they're...
No, please. His name is Robbie October. That is crazy. That is the craziest thing I've ever heard. When I saw that name, Robbie October, it sounds like, I don't know, what it sounds like. Like he's in like Grease the musical or something. Like, I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
that's a crazy name.
So he's like very muscly and very sexy, and he's with another guy who has a blue bandana, who we just call Blue Bandana. And basically they're not on an organized trip because they're like the bad boys, and they like don't follow the rules and they sneak out. And Jess kind of keeps running into him because they're on the same trail up. And so the first time nothing happens, she just sees him and is into him, but can't interact. The second time, she does this amazing textbook, beautiful. She pretends she knows him, and she runs up to him and presses her luscious body against his muscly tree trunk torso and says, Bart Templeton.
Bart Templeton.
And basically he adopts a kind of traditional man role of infantilizing and negging her, saying she's like a baby for hanging out with the group, saying there are all of these rules, saying how terrible it is.
I'm sorry. The way he acts about, he thinks it is like the most nerdiest thing in the world to be on this group trip. I'm like, relax. Like, they are a bunch of teenagers doing a bike trip all around the coast with their like young, hot, sexy teacher friends, and there's no parents. Like, I think that is pretty cool way to spend a summer, and like pretty aspirational. I'd be like, damn, I wish I was on that trip if I were you, instead of being like, ugh. He's like, we're not really into the group things. And then she's like, well, I see you again. He's like, not if you stick with your little group. It's like he acts like it's like she's freaking like Poindexter. It's like, come on.
He keeps being like, oh, there's so many rules. Doesn't it, like, they're talking and Jess is supposed to be cooking dinner for the group. And he's like, doesn't it suck to be in a group because you have all these obligations? You have to be cooking dinner. And it's like, no. What? No, it doesn't suck. Like, we all cook. We cook in turns. It's actually lovely. We've kind of formed a utopian civilization. But instead, she obviously is like, she downplays it. She says she hates the group. She's like, oh, I'm free. I can do whatever I want. And he kind of challenges her, can you do whatever you want? And unfortunately, she's cooking dinner with Bruce Patman, who like wouldn't know a hamburger if it bit him on the face. So Bruce Patman is burning hamburgers and can't make cookies. And so Jess is like, ugh, I can't deal with you now right now, Robbie October. I'm coming back. And after they go to bed, Jess sneaks out with Robbie October.
So she sneaks out in the middle of the woods.
And they go for a walk in the woods. They get lost. They end up in a cave. The cave is populated by a mama bear and her cubs, and they get attacked by a bear.
That was my biggest LOL in terms of the size of the letters, because the chapter starts, it was a standoff. So we don't know where they are. We don't know that they're with a bear. The chapter starts, it was a standoff, and then them back and forth bantering while their bears staring, growling at them with the cubs, and then being like, God damn it, I knew we should have listened to my batteries, and you had the thing, we wouldn't have got lost. Wild. And then what happens with Barry? I mean, we got to talk about it.
To wrap up Robbie October, basically Jess is like, you suck. You got us lost. You didn't bring a flashlight. You got me involved in Yogi Bear stuff. I'm out. And that's the end of Robbie October. This marries nicely with the Barry plot, which I think, Rebecca, maybe you could take a kind of Becky bash at the Barry plot.
Barry, who's by all accounts a normal, nice person, gets universally shunned by the group because he happens to be the slowest cyclist. And no one wants to be friends with him. And similar to how Robin was described, we get the sort of physical embodiment of his supposed like ill-fittingness for society, vis-a-vis clumsiness, vis-a-vis he just kind of can't do anything right. Everything gets knocked over. We get, of course, in San Francisco, they're having the hot and sour soup in Chinatown, and he knocks it over, and everyone's like, ha ha ha, well, something never changed. Because he does have an arc, which is basically everyone shuns him, he wants to leave, and then everything turns around in this bear scenario because it's so crazy. So Jessica and Robbie are like in the cave, and like Robbie's solution is kind of do nothing, and Jessica's like, okay, like, and Robbie's just kind of like, no. And like Jessica hears the group searching for her, so she calls out like, guys, in here or whatever, and Bear's like, ah! And then I wrote down Bear versus Barry, but basically like Barry runs to go get the others. He's like, there's a bear, like, or I don't think he even says there's a bear. He's like, I found them or whatever. I think he like even maybe doesn't mention the bear.
He doesn't mention the bear.
Which is actually smart. And then like none of them would have showed up. So he gets the whole group to go and help them. And it turns out Barry apparently knows something about bears. And I do want to talk about this. And he said that black bears don't usually aggress against people unless provoked. And so his solution is to provoke. And so his solution is to physically attack the bear, which it then chases after him. And again, this was the Yogi Bear and the kind of Looney Tunes of it all, where I was picturing the legs doing the circles, you know? So he gets the bear to chase him. So that being his plan would have resulted in his very speedy death, were it not for the absolutely accidental synchronicity of the crying of the bear cub, which gets the mama to turn her head and say, well, would I rather kill this guy or go get my little one? And so she goes back to the little one. And then Collins goes and saves Barry, and then they all get out. And so Barry then becomes a hero, and by the end is redeemed, and everyone's nice to him, and he has friends. But like, I need to talk about the bear thing for like an hour.
Okay.
So my main thing I want to say is, I don't know if you actually know that I have some bear wisdom. And I don't know if I've shared it with you, but I was thinking this before Barry showed up, and I was wanting to give them advice.
Okay. It's
just a little rhyming thing.
Ooh.
To know what to do with the different bears. So it's just black fight back.
Okay.
So I was telling them they should fight back, actually. Not by throwing rocks at its head, like Charlie's trying to do. So black fight back.
Okay.
Brown lie down.
Yeah, good.
Trying to play dead. White, say goodnight.
You're just dead?
Yeah, you're done. Period.
Wait, sorry. So part of your mnemonic involves giving up?
I didn't make this up. I heard it somewhere. This is actual wisdom. That's actually what people are like advised.
This has been Bear Wisdom with Becky. Well, I was just going to say, we've been recording for over an hour. We've gone into the minutia of Dalton's past life, Barry and the bear. We've talked so much about Courtney and Nolan and all of this nonsense.
Food, spanking.
No,
Spank.
Todd and Liz break up.
Oh.
There's like actual plot related to the world of Sweet Valley that we're just like, oh, whatever, we'll get to it eventually. Todd and Liz break up.
But it feels such an obvious fake breakup that's going to be resolved by the end of the book. It's just like nothing.
So basically...
And Todd sucks, and it's so
Todd
hard.
sucks at all times. And in this one, he falls for Courtney so thoroughly.
Remind them who's Courtney.
Because it's been an hour since we mentioned Courtney. Courtney, of course, is the bad girl from Beverly Hills who's putting on a good girl act and trying to lure Todd back to Beverly Hills with her as her beard. She basically cons him very easily. She has to do almost no work into seeing that Liz is being mean and unfriendly, and he therefore dumps her. And then they just get back together. Nothing. There's no drama. There's no sparks.
Yeah, except Todd does some really shady stuff, and it is reminiscent of how he was with Patsy Weber. And never forget the open bikini straps and the sunscreen, slow circular motions, okay? Because in this one, all Courtney did was be like, my dad's an alcoholic. And then she'd like in the morning be like, Todd, she'd like run into his tent early in the morning and be like, I'm sad, I need you. And he'd be like, oh, it's early. And she'd be like, but it's about daddy. And he'd be like, oh, okay. And then he runs over to her. And then Liz finds them sleeping with their hands intertwined, with their fingers interlaced.
The fuck?
And he absolutely gaslights her by saying that it was like a friendship thing. I'm like, you don't do that with a friend. You do not do that with a friend.
I mean, they're full on holding hands, which in Sweet Valley is like at least second base.
Todd the Turd, I'm going to start calling him. I mean, forget. No, his new name is Turd. I'm only calling him Turd now. Period. Are Elizabeth and Turd headed for disaster?
So they break up, they get back together. Any other big overarching stories you want to hit on?
I would love to talk about Bruce's supposed redemption arc.
Sure.
Vis-a-vis
nothing?
The absolute lowest. If anyone has ever doubted that the standards for men, just in terms of decency, particularly towards women, they should read this book. Because Bruce, he's treated like an angel. He's referred to as a softie because he has decided to, quote unquote, give a second chance to famous former slut Annie Whitman for being a former slut.
Yeah, correct.
Just as a human in the world. And so the question of why is Bruce in a position to be doling out chances to people for just their existence and the sort of arbiter of who should exist and not is never asked. But basically, this happens vis-a-vis this guy, Charlie. So Charlie is like on the tennis team. He's a friend of Bruce. He shows up. No one really knows him. They assume he's just as bad as Bruce. Turns out he's slightly better. He ends up like calling Bruce out on cruelty and stuff. Like when Bruce is teasing Barry, he says like, hey, haven't you put down enough people? Like, stop it. So Charlie has a crush on Annie Whitman, who has recently broken up, we learned, with Ricky Capaldo. And so she's now single. And Bruce is telling him like, well, you know, like what kind of girl she is and all this type of stuff. But he's like nice to Annie or whatever. And she's like, they're like starting to bond or whatever. But then she like goes to their tent. And there's this stupid fucking moment that it all hinges on that makes me so mad, where she hears Bruce and Charlie talking and Bruce being like, well, you know what freaking kind of girl she is. And you know what? People don't change. And Charlie's like, maybe you're right. And Annie runs away in tears. Of course, us understanding that something else was said after that. Us, of course, hoping that what was said after that was, and you know what, Bruce? Her quote unquote changing is besides the point, because she can absolutely be as much of a slut as she wants to. And we owe her respect and treating her well, regardless. And her sex is none of our business. And it is not on us to make any sort of judgment one way or another on her. So fuck the conversation about whether she's changed, because of course that just reinforces the ideology of the slut shaming and thing. That's what I was hoping Charlie said. Of course, what he actually said was that we learn later that makes everything okay to Annie, that makes her so happy, is it turns out he said, so Bruce says, like, people can't change. And then Charlie's had said, maybe you're right, but I don't think so. So it's like he thinks people can change, so he thinks she can stop being a slut. And then Bruce is like, yeah, so you misunderstood. Like, not only was he like saying that you're good, but he even was like advocating for you, that what even made me change my mind about you. So now I even have given you a second chance. And then Annie has like the most happiest look in her eye. And he's like, but don't tell anyone I'm such a softie now. And it's like, wow, like Bruce is this amazing guy. She goes, she's so happy with Charlie now. And I'm just like, teeth emoji, teeth emoji, teeth emoji, teeth emoji.
I will say there is one moment of authentic Bruce redemption arc. So we're fighting this raging forest fire, and they're trying to figure out who's going to do what. And Bruce is like, "Oh, I'll go over there and like beat it back with a pan." He's got like a pan, and he's beating back the fire. And Roger's like, "I'll go with you too." And we remember, listeners, of course, that Roger is Bruce's newly discovered, depending on the story you believe, in the world of the text, either his newly discovered cousin, half cousin, or half brother. But either way, Roger is like, no, you can't fight the fire with me. Only one Patman, we can only risk one Patman's life or something. And it's this beautiful moment where he's like, look, I want our legacy to live on, so we can't both die in this huge blaze. You live on for me. It's sweet. It was
very sweet. We get some fun with letters. So we get Elizabeth writing letters to Enid. I love Elizabeth being really like low-key but high-key gossiping in her letters to Enid, but then trying to pretend like she isn't. So she'll like gossip for like 11 paragraphs and be like, oh, where am I? I got off track. Anyway, the weather's great. That's what I'm really writing to about. It's like all she does is talk shit. So she makes this really funny comment where she's talking about who's doing well in the cycling and who isn't. And she says like Roger and Olivia are at the front of the pack and like, you know, Barry's at the back or whatever. And like, it's even challenging for Bruce or whatever. He's not as fast as Robert. And then she goes, well, I guess cycling muscles and tennis muscles are different muscles. I'm like, okay. And in Jess's letter to Kara, she's talking about how Jessica pretty much, as usual, like understands that Courtney is bullshit. And like, even though Liz in her heart understands Courtney's bullshit, is trying to sort of be like, maybe she's not flirting with Todd, and like maybe she's actually nice and like whatever. And Jessica's like, no, she is flirting with Todd, and Todd's actually flirting with her too, and like you should be mad at him, like this is gross, and like why does Liz tolerate this, basically. So she's telling Kara about this, and she goes, Todd and Courtney both need a sound spanking. That made me laugh and laugh and laugh.
I wrote that down. So we do have to talk
About the paella?
about the paella.
What do you want
Santa
to say?
Barbara, according to this text, is famous for its sumptuous Spanish banquets.
Do you say banquets?
They said banquets in the text,
Sumptuous Spanish banquets? What's banquets?
like a banquet,
No, but like, what are they saying? Like, what do they mean by
like
banquet?
like an array of foods.
Like, in what context? Like, what do you mean? Like a buffet? Like a restaurant? Like a banquet hall? Like what? Like an event? Well, did you Google it? I mean, now we have to Google it.
We have to Google Spanish-style banquets in Santa Barbara. I assume they made it up.
In the 80s. Okay, 1980s. Santa Barbara. I mean, they can't have made it up out of thin air.
Of course they could have.
There is something called banquet restaurants. Okay, this might actually be something called a banquet restaurant. Well, this is interesting. Now I gotta Google what's a banquet restaurant. Hold on.
I think.
No, don't say I think. Hold on. You think what?
Isn't a banquet?
Wait. Okay, it's where there's a formal large meal where a number of people consume food together. Banquet service style may feature plated food, buffet, or food stations, or pas hors d'oeuvres. It may be formal service, uniform decor around dinner tables, utensils, and drinkware for each guest.
But I mean, I know what a banquet is. That's a word I know.
It's a word I know. I don't think we know what it means. I think we know what it means, but I don't know what you're picturing with this pie.
I'm just picturing the 12 of them sitting around a big table, kind of banquet style seating.
Like dim sum? Like a big dim sum table, kind of?
Does dim sum come up in here too, or no?
No.
Or do I just want dim sum? Now I'm hungry.
Okay, I can't talk about the banquet anymore.
Okay, let's keep moving then.
Oh, did we get our first black or brown person? Even just as a side character? And I'm talking literally an extra, like a background person. Literally just, there's someone described as a dark-skinned boy. So it's in the context
Oh
of
my God.
they're at the youth hostel, they're passing a group, they're checking out the guys, and there's 3 card players, a lanky, dark-skinned boy, another boy with a blue bandana fastened around his neck, and their sandy-haired companion, because of course whiteness is unmarked, and you don't have to mention white skin, but they do mention the dark skin. So I think they mean black. They probably mean black. So I'm just clocking it because of course, you know, the oppressive whiteness of Sweet Valley is a sort of lingering
Hegemonic force. Sure.
Yeah.
So here's some just kind of a rapid fire things I noticed. One thing I think is weird is that Lila explicitly says that she was expecting Barry, Chrome Dome's nephew, to be gorgeous. Where it's like, why would you expect that?
Yeah, it felt like the thing of that was weird because they like flip it and reverse it too many times. Like, this is what happens. Like basically they're like, oh, Chrome Dome, who is a notorious sort of dork, right? That's the principal. His nephew's coming on the trip. His name's Barry. You would think that what's going to happen is, oh, no one's seen him yet. We are going to assume that he's going to be a dork, but he's actually going to turn out to be hot.
Right.
But then that isn't what happens. What happens is Jessica and Lila think that's what's going to happen. And then he turns out to be, according to them, not hot. So it's like, huh?
As we keep rolling along, in chapter 2, I made the note, is Colin sober? They go out of their way to make it clear that Miss Dalton is having champagne at the Beverly Hills mansion, and Collins is having like tonic water or something.
Wait a minute.
Or club soda.
Wait
I was like, wait, is he sober? With that in mind, Mr. Thomas, who is Courtney's dad, invited Roger Collins and Nora Dalton to the mansion for a cocktail later that evening while the kids were out getting a taste of Los Angeles' glittery nightlife. Also, fucking unreal. It's like, oh yeah, high school juniors, you just go enjoy Los Angeles' glittery nightlife. I'm gonna have a cocktail with this guy.
Well, it was also really crazy that we then never got that scene of that Los Angeles nightlife. I was like, oh my God, what's it gonna be? Like, and then we never saw it.
So he pours a glass of chilled champagne for Miss Dalton and fixed a Perrier with lime for Mr. Collins.
I wonder if it was this. I wonder if it was a negotiation of a discussion of the publisher of like, do we want to show Collins and Dalton drinking? Like, is cocktails, like, should they be having cocktails while the kids are like unsupervised? Like, is that bad? And then they're like, we don't want to encourage drinking because like these are supposed to be like their friends. They look up to them. Like, are they gonna then be trying to drink? And then they're like, well, what if we have one of them not drinking? So it's like cool to not drink also. Or he's sober. I don't know. Okay, should we talk about the reveal of It's actually very funny because in the past, and I didn't remember that we actually were going to find this out, but in the past we were trying to think, where did Collins maybe go to college? And our best guess was Berkeley. And in this book, I was stunned to see that we actually learn where he actually went.
He went to New York City's Columbia University. That's how it's described, as New York City's Columbia University, as opposed to the Columbia Universities elsewhere.
Good for him, I guess.
Yeah. Couldn't get into Brandeis, fine. The opening of chapter 6, we have all of the kind of kids dancing along to the Jackson 5's ABC.
Uncomfortable moment. I don't
Why?
like
What's weird about dancing? We're all just friends, Becky. Why can't we all just dance to ABC by the Jackson 5?
Well, because Jessica is actually dancing with Collins.
Oh, is he?
And I don't like this. I do not like this.
This is not okay.
No. When they come home, we learn that Enid, who was working for the summer at Casey's scooping ice cream, had a summer love with a guy named Hank from Boston.
Summer love is overselling it. He came in 3 times to get ice cream, and at the end, he finally asked her out. But they went on 1 date or something, and it was the end of the summer.
Well, it's only been 2 weeks, I guess, right?
Oh, that's true. I was like, I mean, come on, Becky. It's like not that, but oh yeah. In 2 weeks, that's actually a lot.
Forest fire? Okay, there's been a fire, there's been a bear, it's been a lot.
Jessica stayed out all night. Of course, Liz and Todd broke up and got back together. Of course, Miss Dalton had a secret revealed and then got back together with Collins.
And also was human trafficked. Disneyland also was so jarring because it's like, whoa, they're at Disneyland. It's like, it feels so brandy. Was it Disneyland SpawnCon? Because they were just like, Disneyland, the magical, nice place. Then they just like didn't do that much. And I'm like, that would have been a whole book. It's just so much.
It's just too much. One thing I thought was interesting is we see Lila blackmailing Miss Dalton, which like is blackmail the Fowler family tradition, because we know, of course, that her father, George Fowler,
famous computer chip magnate and human trafficker.
Exactly. He is also blackmailing Miss Dalton. It's interesting that they first immediately both go towards a blackmailing thing.
Mm-hmm.
And
this really, can I tell you what this thing? There was a real chemistry plot at this really stupid movie I watched. You want to know about it?
Okay, there was a real what plot?
Like chemistry test. Like,
oh, sure.
Sort of like related, not related, but like kind of reminds me of Dalton. Of like, you didn't have to do all that. But I tell you that after.
So Lila basically, Jess and Lila have this plan to get rid of Courtney. And then Lila finds out that Courtney's dad is quote unquote an alcoholic and terrible. And all of a sudden Lila's like, well, now we can't be mean to her. We have to be nice to her. And it was like really, for me, it was really interesting to be like, wait, you know that you're being awful to this girl. And you're fine being awful to her when she's just a rich girl. But once you find out that she's a rich girl with a tragic backstory, now you can't be awful anymore. I thought that was interesting.
Maybe it's like the daddy angle. It's not just that it's a tragic backstory, it's the daddy backstory. You know? They probably have a lot in common. You know, why is she spending all the time at the chic clubs? Because probably daddy's off on the movies. So probably
like
she and Lila, you know what I mean? So probably she and Lila can relate on that level. One thing I thought was wild was like, first of all, like, yeah, Collins is absolutely extra Collinsy in this one, but Liz is being all like, I gotta get out of here. And she sort of uses the idea that she might have been the one to start the forest fire, even though it was Courtney flicking a cigarette butt, but she was the last one to put out the fire or whatever. So she's like, maybe it was me. So she's like, Collins, I should leave the trip. It was me. But I think it's just, she just wants to get out of there because she's sick of seeing Turd and Courtney together. But basically, she like ends up telling Collins what happened and that she and Turd broke up. And Collins is like, oh my God, Liz, why didn't you tell me? That's his reaction. He's like, you didn't tell me?
You broke up with Turd? Girl, dish.
I'm like, what is wrong with you? And then the way he handles stuff is to just gossip. We talk about gossip. Collins is absolutely loose-lipped. The first thing he does is he tells Elizabeth, first of all, Nora's whole story.
Yeah.
I'm like, that is not yours to tell. She specifically just told you that there's an abuser or an abuse-related situation and that this is about her safety. Why don't we go ahead and let her disclose? Like, this has already been revealed without her wanting to in the community. Why don't we go ahead and give her some agency left to disclose this in her own decision. Okay. Instead of you blabbing it over to Liz to teach her a lesson about how something else. And then even Liz engaged in this just gossip and shit talking about Courtney and trying to like understand her psyche and all the this and that. And well, the dad said this and then she said that, and he's not an alcoholic. And I'm just like, this is so stupid. It's so nonsensical. None of it means anything. Collins and Liz act like they have this big reveal of Courtney because like apparently, but it's like, it's never actually explained the supposed like dissonance of like, she never had some big huge lie. Like, I mean, I guess she said her dad was an alcoholic. They don't have proof it's not true. So it's not like there's some big proof or there's some big thing that happens that makes them all like, you know what I mean? Like, so I don't get it. And then Collins is like, well, why don't you go humiliate her in front of the entire group? Liz gets Courtney in front of the whole group, looks at Collins, and he gives her a smile and a nod, while Liz basically like calls her out on being a shitty person, which again, we assume she's lying about the alcoholism and think she is, but Liz doesn't necessarily have proof of that. And I don't know that's necessarily her job to be, again, like Bruce in a way, sort of being like, I am the arbiter of humanity. I say who is good and bad, and I must sort of announce this in front of a crowd. And the fact that Collins actually encourages her to do this. But the craziest part was Courtney's like, I thought very appropriately, says something like, it's my business. And then Liz is like, when you ruined my vacation, you made it my business. I was like, I said, what? Who have we here? I said.
In addition, Collins repeatedly calls Elizabeth his friend, and at one point literally says, Elizabeth, I want you to know you're more than just one of my favorite students. I consider you a friend.
So gross.
And Elizabeth's like trying to be an adult and is like, but rules are rules. And Collins is like, I'm going to try and see if I can break the rules for you. And meanwhile, don't give up on Todd. Fight for what you want. Don't let one thing get in the way of the other. It's like, what are y'all doing?
So crazy. It's so crazy. Liz and Collins' relationship, it's almost like, you know what? I have a new interpretation of it. Given that Liz is now, I think we have good reason to believe is also more gay than not, maybe.
Sure.
The relationship with Collins maybe is sort of like more codependent kind of thing than like I mean, they flirt.
Yeah, they do.
The extent to which she defaults to him as like the person she confides in, and the extent to which he sort of constructs his whole world around the fact of his like best friendship with her is like very, very, very strange.
Also strange, of course, is that Nora Dalton tells the entire story of her bad history and then goes, Lila, it was especially hard for me to say all of this in front of you. And then Lila is like, okay, so it did take courage. Thank you, Lila. Miss Dalton returned graciously. We're very proud of you, Nora. Mr. Collins went around to where she sat and draped his arm around her shoulder, each and every one of us.
Not to completely like state the most obvious thing in the world, but I think like just to be absolutely clear, these people need boundaries. They are talking as if they are automatically all entitled to each other's most personal details, and that they all should like compulsively share with each other every second of the day, and that like teachers, students, teachers, like there's absolutely no difference.
It's really gross. The idea that it's like, I got these kids' parents to agree to an itinerary that hasn't even been nailed down.
That includes letting them loose in LA, absolutely getting coked out of their minds.
Absolutely coked out of their minds. But also, like, they're not even sure when they'll be in each place. There are phantom days, famously, as you point out.
The fact that they all emerged alive it's shocking for so many different reasons. They should have died so many times. Like,
somebody drowned. Who almost drowned? Oh, Miss Dalton almost drowned. We skipped that entirely.
Oh, we didn't talk about the stingray attack that wasn't. Yeah, I'm done with her. I'm done with her.
Wow.
It's too much. It's just too much. I don't like it. I'm turned off by her.
Like she hasn't been through enough?
Like, I remember when she showed up at the dance with that rose tucked in her hair and her weird long skirt.
That was literally 20 books ago. Like,
yeah, I'm just like, I don't know. Does everything need to be such a show, Miss Dalton? Like, do we all need to just know this much about you?
I don't need to know as much about her as I know.
Like, Collins has to save her from a stingray. I'm like, what? Why?
for me, it is the fact that the resolution of all of this is like we basically sit around a campfire and expose Miss Dalton's tragic backstory, Lila's dad's sexual blackmail, and Courtney's lies to everyone, and then just call it a day.
Wait, was Lila's dad's sexual blackmail exposed to the group?
Wasn't that? Yes.
Can you point me to the page, please?
Well, that's why she says this was so hard to say in front of you.
Well, I
Lila.
thought she was just saying because of their relationship, not because of the fact of your dad is trafficking me.
No, I believe it was because of the fact of the dad trafficking.
Okay, well, I'd like to see that in the text.
Well, why else would it be hard to say this in front of Lila?
Because she's been dating her dad, and because they have this personal connection and they have this like other relationship outside of school. Like, why wouldn't it be harder to say in front of Lila?
But she doesn't want to be dating Lila's dad. She's being coerced into dating Lila's dad.
But just why would she include that detail? She doesn't need to include that detail. No one's asking. Like, I don't think it's going there in this conversation.
Okay, well,
I'm just saying, like, I don't think she tells her that.
That's too bad.
Is it? I don't know. What's Lila going to do with that?
It's also just weird that Mr. Collins is like, we're all very proud of you. What are we proud of you about? Like,
maybe they're proud of her about the disclosure, about being honest about her real past.
And the fact that she's being coerced into dating Fowlercrest.
No, but that's over now.
Or is it?
Well, yeah, because she just told them, so he doesn't have anything on her anymore.
Well, I thought you said he didn't tell them. Oh, I see. I'm sorry. I blew it. I'm realizing now that Miss Dalton could tell most of the story without telling the sexual blackmail part. In my mind, you can't tell the story without telling the sexual blackmail part, but you can't.
It is a very important part of the story.
It's central, I feel. How else would she explain getting back together to Collins to the kids? And you know she has to explain getting back together with Collins to the kids.
Is that it? Should we talk about the next book?
I don't know anything about the next book, so I don't know what we would say.
I wonder if I guess there isn't a cliffhanger for
There's
it.
not. Believe me, I wish. I was hanging on for a cliffhanger. And
All right. Well, you want me to tell you the title? I could tell you the title. You could guess, and I won't tell you anything. Okay, that's actually fun. That's actually interesting. Ooh, and this is called Creativity Within Constraints.
It's like a sonnet.
And Robert, I didn't want to say this, but at some point I do have to say not everything is a sonnet.
Not
everything is like a sonnet.
I knew that was going to come up. Yeah.
You know.
But this one thing is a little like a sonnet.
It's called Too Much in Love.
Oh, yeah. Wait, what was happening at the end? Who was too much in love? Shit.
Well, I can tell you, because I won't tell you, except what was in the last book. I'll just tell you.
Thank you.
It's Bill Chase and Dee Dee Gordon.
Oh, yeah, they're breaking up.
Something's weird with them, and she stopped taking the design classes at the Civic Center, and then they're having a fight in the lunchroom, and Elizabeth's wondering what's up with them.
I imagine Dee Dee Gordon is going through some kind of familial stress that is causing her to be unable to attend design classes, and Bill Chase is freaking out about it. And
what might the title then allude to? We might ask.
Too Much in Love. That's what's called Too Much in Love?
It's an interesting title, isn't it? In terms of just the construction, it's a bit different than what we usually get, I think.
Too Much in Love.
Isn't it interesting?
Yeah, I mean, because what we've seen from Dee Dee and Bill is that they are not too much in love.
What is too much in love?
They seem too little in love.
Right.
I think too much in love is like when you're so obsessive that you're neglecting your own health or obligation, or, you know, like when you're going to have to face it, you're addicted to love, that kind of thing. But who am I? I'm no Bruce Patman to be issuing edicts about what's too much, not enough.
Remains to be seen. So can I tell you about that movie I watched and why it was a chemistry test? It's sort of Ms. Dalton, just again in the sense of you absolutely did not have to do all that, okay? And I'm going to spoil it for you because you shouldn't watch it. It's a piece of shit movie, and I figured out the ending within 5 seconds. And I was
What's the movie? What's it called?
It's called Side Effects.
Oh.
Rooney Mara.
Oh.
Jude Law.
Oh.
Channing Tatum.
Oh.
Who I
that must be bittersweet for you.
Famously loved. I can't talk about that.
Yeah, I know, that's why it's bittersweet.
Catherine Zeta-Jones.
Oh.
I'm just going to tell you really quick. Channing Tatum's married to Rooney Mara. He's about to come home from prison. We learned that he was in prison for insider trading.
Ooh, my favorite kind of trading.
So he's coming back, kind of reintegrating into life, kind of figuring out how to start new, and they're sort of figuring out their relationship again. And she is like struggling with some depression and suicidality. And ends up being treated by a psychiatrist, which is Jude Law,
Ooh.
who starts giving her this
medication with some side effects.
They're experimenting with antidepressants, and there's some new one that there's a trial and there's a pharmaceutical component, and he's with the pharmaceutical people and he's doing a trial and he puts her on this and he puts her on this other thing, and some things get better, but then she's having side and she's sleepwalking, and then she murders Channing Tatum in her sleep.
Oh, cool.
And so then it becomes big like legal question of Jude Law's wife asks him, like, he's like, my patient got arrested for today or something. And his wife is like, did they do it? Are they guilty? And I'm like, I know exactly what he's going to say. And then he said the thing I knew he was going to say, which was, in this case, those are two very different questions. Mm. And then it's this whole thing. When I tell you I knew exactly, and would you like to know what happens?
I guess. I mean, I'm already here. Was it insider trading? Did it fuck up something with Jude Law? And so Jude Law got Rooney Mara to kill Channing Tatum, like with the drugs, hypnosis, etc. Was it all part of a plot?
No. So what happens is they're basically setting it up to seem like Jude Law is like going to be nefarious.
Right.
And you think there's something sinister going on with him and the pharmaceutical people, maybe, or that he knows about something and he's somehow something, right? And you're like, but I said, that's not what's really happening. I said, would you like to know what this is? I said, this is a primal fear. She faked it. She murdered him in her quote unquote sleep. Ooh. She was actually conscious. She orchestrated this absolute whole thing to murder him. And then she like did this whole thing with Jude Law as her psychiatrist and started taking the medication and started having all these demonstrable side effects and like all this thing. And she like basically faked it all in order to murder him and get away with it. And then that is exactly what it was. With an additional component that I did not guess, which was that, and everything about it was so fucking stupid. Here's what it was. There's a lesbian twist. Ooh. Her and Catherine Zeta-Jones, who's her old therapist, got together basically while he was in prison. She was like so mad at him or whatever. So she concocted this scheme. She basically like was not depressed. And Catherine Zeta-Jones was like, let me teach you how to fake. They concocted this whole scheme with the sleeping and the knife and all of it. So Catherine Zeta-Jones, quote unquote, taught her how to be depressed so that she could like perform depression accurately to psychiatrists and stuff so that they could like execute this scheme. And Catherine Zeta-Jones was doing research on the sleepwalking as the trial medicine. So Catherine Zeta-Jones knew that it has this effect, right? So she pretended to take the medicine, wasn't taking it. And so Catherine Zeta-Jones taught her how to act depressed. And then she told Catherine Zeta-Jones everything she had learned from Channing Tatum, quote unquote, before he went to jail about like the stock market or something. Okay. So Catherine Zeta-Jones then like executed this big scheme to bet against Ablixa, the medicine. So because as soon as she gets murdered, it's all over the news, the stuff goes down.
That's smart.
So that component I didn't guess. But the whole thing is it's so fucking stupid because they didn't need to do all that. She could have just dumped him. There's no motivation for any of it. It's just like literally it's like he goes to jail. She doesn't like him. She wants to be with Catherine Zeta-Jones now. All she has to do is be like,
bye.
Let's be divorced now. Like literally that's all she had to do. It wasn't like he was abusive. It wasn't like he's like so instead they do this that involves her having to crash her car into a wall and know that the airbags is going to save her. Like it's just so dumb. And I hated it.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Because it was exactly Primal Fear. It was the exact same plot.
I haven't seen Primal Fear.
Well, now you can't. And which is very sad because it's what this wishes it was. Primal Fear is excellent.
Which one's Primal Fear?
Well, now you can't watch it.
No, I mean like who's in it?
Edward Norton, Richard Gere.
Is there a woman?
There's never a woman. No, there's actually an important woman who plays Richard Gere's ex-wife who's representing the prosecution. And I'm going to be mad at myself that I can't remember who it is. Let me quickly Google. It's someone I know and I'm going to kick myself. I'm going to kick myself.
Don't kick yourself.
And it's Laura Linney, of course. It's Laura Linney.
I would love Laura Linney. You should kick yourself. She's the best. Okay, love you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Sweet Valley Hive, hosted by Robert Marks and Rebecca Pardo. For more, check out our Instagram at Sweet Valley Hive. Theme song by Yessie and artwork by Elliot Carroll.